When the story of Africa is told, it is often told through the voices of outsiders who paint the continent as weak, dependent, and incapable of shaping its own destiny.
But there is another story, one that burns quietly in the hearts of millions across the continent. It is the story of unity, resilience, and a determination to break free from centuries of exploitation. This story begins with a vision, a Pan-African vision, a vision where Africans stand together, write their own destiny, and reclaim the dignity that was stolen from them. Asterisk, no single figure embodies this vision more powerfully than Thomas Sankara, the revolutionary leader of Burkina Faso. To speak of Pan-African inspiration is to speak of Sankara's legacy, a man who refused to bow before the weight of imperialism and dared to imagine an Africa that could feed itself, clothe itself, and govern itself with pride. He was not just a president. He was a symbol, a spark that ignited hope across borders. Asterisk, Sankara's leadership was short-lived, just 4 transformative years, from 1983 to 1987, but the impact of his ideas continues to echo. He called upon Africans to believe in their own potential, to stop seeing themselves through the lens of Western approval, and to recognize that liberation was not a gift to be handed down, but a right to be claimed. His speeches were fiery, not because they were filled with anger, but because they were filled with truth. He exposed the injustice of a global system designed to keep Africa poor while its resources enriched others. Asterisk, for Sankara, Pan-Africanism was not an abstract dream. It was a practical strategy for survival and growth. He argued that as long as African nations remained divided economically, politically, and militarily, they would remain vulnerable to exploitation. But united, they could build a force that no empire could crush. His message was simple yet profound. The enemies of Africa are united. Therefore, the people of Africa must also unite. Asterisk, the Sankara legacy also carried a strong moral component. He lived modestly, rejecting the lavish lifestyle of so many post-colonial leaders. He sold the government's fleet of luxury cars, cut ministerial privileges, and traveled in a humble Renault 5. He reduced his own salary and encouraged self-reliance projects like tree planting, local food production, and public health campaigns. In doing so, he proved that leadership was not about personal enrichment, but about service to the people. Asterisk. This humility and integrity gave him an almost mythic status. Even today, decades after his assassination, his face appears on murals, posters, and flags across Africa. Young activists invoke his name as a source of courage, while communities fighting against corruption and dependency cite his policies as blueprints for renewal. His vision continues to breathe life into the Pan-African struggle, reminding us that true independence cannot be outsourced, negotiated, or borrowed. It must be built from within. Asterisk, yet Sankara's legacy is not merely a memory of the past. It is a challenge for the present. It asks today's Africans, will you continue to follow the paths laid down by foreign powers, or will you have the courage to chart your own way? The inspiration he left behind is like a torch. It can either be left to burn out, or it can be carried forward, lighting the way for generations to come. Asterisk, Pan-Africanism, then, is not just a political ideology, it is a lifeline. It is the realization that the struggles of one African nation are tied to the struggles of all. Sankara understood this, and he lived and died for this principle. His words still call out, we must dare to invent the future. Independence was supposed to be the end of Africa's long night of colonial domination. Flags were raised, new anthems were sung, and nations declared themselves free. Yet, as the decades passed, it became clear that a new form of domination had taken root. This was not colonialism in its traditional sense, no foreign soldiers directly ruling the people, no governors dictating local policies. Instead, it was subtler, more sophisticated, and in many ways more dangerous. This was neocolonialism, the invisible chains that bind African nations to the interests of powerful outsiders. Neocolonialism wears many masks. It hides behind international aid, behind development loans, behind military partnerships, and even behind cultural exports. It whispers promises of progress, but its true aim is control. It ensures that while African nations may govern themselves on paper, the real levers of power, economic, political, and military remain in the hands of others. This is why Kwame Nkrumah, one of Africa's foremost independence leaders, warned the essence of neocolonialism is that the state which is subject to it is, in theory, independent, but in reality, its economic system and political policy are directed from outside. Nowhere is this clearer than in the economic sphere. The use of the CFA franc, a currency tied to the French treasury, is a striking example. For decades, West and Central African nations have been forced into a monetary system that restricts their sovereignty, keeping their reserves in European banks and limiting their ability to design independent economic policies. Similarly, foreign corporations continue to dominate African natural resources. From uranium in Niger to gold in Mali, from oil in Nigeria to cobalt in the Congo, the continent's wealth is extracted not to enrich local communities but to feed global industries. But neocolonialism is not only about economics. It is also about security. Foreign military bases dot the African landscape, often justified as partnerships against terrorism. Yet their presence raises a haunting question. If Africa is truly independent, why do foreign troops still guard its soil? These bases may claim to provide stability, but they also cement dependency, ensuring that African nations cannot build security structures of their own. Culturally, too, neocolonialism is pervasive. African children grow up studying European histories while their own heroes are forgotten. Western media portrays Africa as a continent of poverty and chaos, shaping global perceptions in ways that strip Africans of dignity. Even education systems and governance models are often replicas of colonial structures, ill-suited to local realities but maintained because they serve external interests. The struggle against neocolonialism, then, is not just a political fight. It is a fight for dignity, for the right to self-definition, and for the ability to walk independently in the world. It is a fight waged in parliaments, in schools, in markets, in villages, and on the digital battlefield of information. Yet, this struggle is not hopeless. Across Africa, voices are rising. Young people are demanding currency reform, questioning the presence of foreign troops, and reclaiming their cultural heritage. Leaders in the Sahel have taken bold steps to challenge old power structures, calling for a future free from the shadow of external domination. The truth is this: neocolonialism survives only as long as people accept it. The moment Africans believe deeply in their own ability to govern, to trade, to protect, and to define themselves, neocolonialism begins to lose its grip. It thrives on dependency, and so the greatest weapon against it is self-reliance, confidence, and unity. The struggle against neocolonialism is not merely resistance. It is creation. It is the building of a new order where Africa is not dictated to, but where Africa speaks for itself. And in that struggle, every step forward is a step toward true freedom. 3. Freedom without economic independence is an illusion. Political sovereignty may give a nation a flag, a seat at the United Nations, and the outward symbols of statehood, but if its economy is still tied to the will of others, then that sovereignty is fragile. For Africa, the question of economic self-reliance is not optional. It is the very foundation of true liberation. Economic self-reliance begins with a simple but powerful idea. Africa must produce what it consumes and consume what it produces. For too long, the continent has been trapped in a pattern designed by colonialism and reinforced by neocolonialism, exporting raw materials at low prices and importing finished goods at high prices. This dependency drains wealth, creates vulnerability, and prevents genuine development. To break this cycle, Africa must industrialize on its own terms, adding value to its own resources before they leave its shores. Agriculture is perhaps the clearest starting point. Despite having vast fertile lands, Africa still imports billions of dollars worth of food each year. This paradox is a result of policies that favor cash crops for export over staple crops for local consumption. Economic self-reliance means reversing this trend, investing in local farming, empowering smallholder farmers and ensuring that every community can feed itself first before feeding global markets. Food security is not just about hunger. It is about dignity and sovereignty. A nation that cannot feed its people cannot truly claim independence. Industry is the second pillar. The continent's rich deposits of gold, oil, diamonds, and rare minerals like cobalt and lithium are the raw materials of the modern world. Yet, when exported in their raw state, they enrich foreign industries while leaving African economies vulnerable to price fluctuations. Imagine the transformation if these resources were refined, processed, and manufactured into final products. Within Africa itself, such a shift would create jobs, strengthen local economies, and break the cycle of dependency,